And Ryan, you are on.
All right, it is 7 o'clock, so we're going to go ahead and get started here. My name is Ryan Kelster. I'm the sports director for athletics. If you're here for the athletics preseason webinar, you are at the right place. Along with me tonight is Ron Freeman, who will be the director of athletics, the athletics venue, Mike Sarnowski, the VP of sports, and Steve, who is a senior director of sports and competition. So for everybody who's on tonight, thank you very much for taking your time, and I know that you'll find this to be educational. As a reminder, this is being recorded and it'll be posted on the coach's resource page for your convenience at a later date.
Okay, I'll take this. Folks, again, thank you for taking your time this evening. Just want to put out on the table that obviously we're in some strange and ever-changing times. Things are changing on we say here, a weekly, sometimes a daily, heck, sometimes it's an hourly basis and such. So at this point in time, we are proceeding with on the basis and the assumption that we will be able to resume athlete training and competition activities in the fairly near future. And therefore, we're going to go ahead with webinars this evening on that assumption, on that basis. We will be having a meeting with our area leaders on Saturday, this coming Saturday, March 21st, where we're going to talk through issues, options, and such. If anything changes, you have our promise that we will notify area leaders, coaches, athletes, families, and volunteers associated with the summer games, sports of track and field, bocce, cheerleading, softball, and swimming as soon as it's practical to do so. And it is noted there, we truly appreciate your patience. We know this is not a great situation for anybody, and we're all in it together, and we really appreciate your patience and understanding there. So.
I want to jump in as well before Ryan hits on the agenda. Thank you for that, Mike. One small addition is we do have a bocce webinar immediately following this, so we can field questions until about 5 till 8, and then we'll have to shut this one down, and you can follow up with Ryan with any additional questions as we move forward. Again, to be respectful to the bocce coaches as well, as that webinar starts right at 8 o'clock. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. So we're done with our introductions and the welcome. We'll be covering entries and entry processes, rules and rules reminders that Ron will jump in with, qualifying events, how many of those you need, where you can find some of those opportunities, resources, administration, which regards to paperwork, entries, GMS work, stuff like that, and then finally deadlines and dates that we need to abide by, followed by the Q&A that Steve referred to. So as a reminder, with each webinar, we do cover this. No athlete or volunteer may participate in any manner in a Special Olympics program without a valid and current medical form or volunteer application certification. There is no exception to this, and we ask that each coach also has that binder with them at all times in case there's ever a situation that does occur where you need to access that quickly. In regards to working with your area leadership, each county kind of has their own person that does GMS work. Sometimes that's an area director, sometimes that's a separate individual. Work closely with them, making sure that all your athletes and the coaches' certifications are up to date. If you are a coach, you should have received an email from me roughly a week or two ago that has to do with certifications and where you stand in regards to that. If you have any questions or did not find your name on there, reach out to me and I'll search you individually. Regarding deadlines, what is due? So on 4/23, our deadline for the registration, that's coming up. Our last date for missing forms will be submitted to headquarters on 5/4, followed by a competition deadline on 5/18. And last date to update scores is 5/20. Those first 3 dates were sent out a while ago to you regarding to those. But the last one I don't believe I ever included. So as a reminder, again, the last dates to submit updated scores will be 5/20/20 for those to be in GMS.
One note with this also, if there is any kind of a change in start dates and such, we of course, given the COVID-19 situation, we of course would shift and make some adjustments here as we can. So yeah. Okay, oh, so I'll jump in here. Okay, so hopefully some of you had the opportunity to join us back at the beginning of the year where we reviewed the coach education and development system that we've had in place. We've had this actually rolled out over the last more than 18 months, I guess, with area directors and coaches and such. And we're going to talk about it a little bit here because there is a little bit of a change that kicks in but has some potential significant implications. The reason we put this whole thing forward was quite simply our athletes deserve the best coaches that we possibly can provide and develop. Coaches should always be looking at improving their skills and improving the training that they can offer to athletes, and having a regular coach development program as a standard for virtually any sports organization. So what has changed? Quite frankly, really nothing has changed in terms of the process. Well, although we do know that some folks have had some confusion. What actually will change is that the full implementation means that the consequence, if you will, for not having a fully certified coach will actually come into play. We've talked about this again for 18 months. It's a heck of a long runway getting up here. It was area leaders' recommendation that we delay that implementation. I think it was the right move. And so, but now is the time as we're going forward. And that'll kick off with the Sports for Summer Games, and then we'll continue on. So the gist of that is that in order to bring athletes to attend a state competition or championship, there must be a fully certified head coach, including their sports certification, needs to be up to date and valid and such. And then also, we'll talk a little bit more about that in terms of the credentialing and such that's there. And then in addition, to take a team to any competition above the state level, for example, the Penn Relays, which I know have been delayed now, but or any other USA Games or any other type of thing, the individual has to be an advanced coach. This is the model. Hopefully you've seen it numerous times, and thank you to Janet Larimore for taking a whole lot of different words that we had, a much more verbose model, and laying it out as a in a much more visually appealing. Basically, we have 5 different categories of certification within the sports realm. There's a general volunteer, which I'm sure all of you have taken care of. There's a sport volunteer, and this is someone who is doing some sports activities, not quite at the level of being an assistant coach. Could be the sports coordinator if you have that model for your county, or it could be someone else who is at that level. That individual would need to, in addition to having their volunteer application and screening and protective behaviors, would need to have the concussion course. The assistant coach is the next one up. And then in addition, so for that, in addition to the concussion course, they would need to have completed coaching Special Olympics athletes. It notes here, coaching unified sports. That really only applies to the 5 to 10% of coaches who are only coaching unified teams. It wouldn't apply to track coaches and such. If you're almost everybody, 90 to 95%, need that base core course of coaching Special Olympics athletes. Then to earn your head coach certification, you need all of that plus the sports specific course. And then for the advanced coach, all of that plus principles of coaching. In each case, every time you renew your certification, it's valid for 3 years from the time that you completed the most recent learning opportunity. For coaches who have existing certifications, all of your current certifications will be honored through your current expiration dates, whether you've met all the criteria on that list or not. So if you have a track coach certification that's valid until September of 2020, even if you haven't taken CSOA or coaching Special Olympics athletes, that's still valid until September of 2020. We're not going to yank it away from you because the system has changed. We're honoring all of them through your current expiration dates. However, in order to renew, if you have not taken coaching Special Olympics athletes, in order to renew, you do have to complete that to renew your certification. And again, none of that has changed. We've had that. That's the standard as the model has gone out, but some folks have had some confusion. Should also point out that coaching Special Olympics athletes, the course, you only have to take one time. There had been a rumor somewhere that you needed to take that every 3 years, and that is not accurate. Your certification needs to be renewed at least every 3 years, but that specific course is not required. Again, they're valid for 3 years. Assistant coaches, if you've earned an assistant coach certification because you've taken coaching Special Olympics athletes, but you haven't taken the sport-specific course for this particular sport, you can renew that certification as an assistant coach by completing basically any of the approved courses. We do recommend potentially advancing your coaching knowledge and taking a sport-specific course, however, and earning that certification level as a head coach. For head coaches, there's two different choices. One, you can complete the sport-specific course. However, that only is workable as a renewal option if you have taken coaching Special Olympics athletes. If you need to renew and you haven't taken coaching Special Olympics athletes, it doesn't matter if you take 5 sport-specific courses, it's not going to renew until you complete coaching Special Olympics athletes. Again, the coaching opportunities must be hosted or approved by SOMD. You could also, instead of the sport-specific, if you've already earned it and you've completed your coaching Special Olympics athletes, you can take a general coaching course. We have some lists later on that we'll look at. Need to complete a sport-specific course at least once every 2 renewals, if you will, every 6 years. And then I'm just going to kind of fly through. So implication, or what are the implications of full implementation? Oh, that's a tongue twister. A, as I mentioned before, is bringing athletes to a state competition. In order for athletes to come to a state competition, they must have a fully certified head coach, at least one, registered in advance, or the team won't be able to attend. The true team sports doesn't apply here to track, so we'll leave that off. We strongly recommend having several coaches certified at that level, and most programs do have that. It needs to be generally completed prior to the training registration deadline. For Summer Games 2020, we're going to extend that to the competition registration deadline to give just a little bit of extra time, but thereafter it will be the training registration deadline for the sport. And we do recognize that it does mean that some athletes or teams may not be able to come to the state competition because their coach has not completed what they need to complete and earn the certifications. Again, we've given a year and a half of runway here with the area leaders and coaches, and it is time now to go to implementation. Additionally, at the state competition, only those who have earned their sports certification as a head coach or advanced coach will be credentialed as a head coach or just a regular coach there. And then assistant coaches, if you've earned that but not anything higher in this sport, then you'll be credentialed as an assistant coach. If you haven't earned either of those, you will not be credentialed. You may be a sport volunteer if you've met those, or you could just be a general volunteer or chaperone. There are specific things that only head coaches will be able to do. That's going to vary by sport. There's some that are listed there that are kind of generic. I believe Ryan and Ron have a slide later about that, specific to track. This kind of goes through the different levels of certification, or the different delegation roles rather, and the certification that's required. So you can see, in order to be become at any state competition as a sport volunteer, you need to have that level of certification in your sport. To be a coach, you would need to have the head coach certification. Even if you're not literally the head coach for your team, you need to have earned that certification. And then also we talked about having being able to take folks to competition above the state level. That's required for advanced coaches, which requires the completion of the Principles of Coaching course. We have a session of that being offered on June 20th, and then another one has been added for September 12th. If your coach or your team doesn't have an advanced coach, they won't be considered for selection. that generally applies to full teams, but I would apply here. If you wish to take a team and be a coach for that team at that higher level, you have to have that advanced level certification first. It includes USA Games, World Games, and then any of the NITs or National Invitational Tournaments, NRSA flag football, and others. It's, again, Penn relays aren't listed there, but that would include that as well. And I'm sure that there are others that we don't have listed. On the coach resource page, which hopefully all of you are familiar with, there is a coach education and development page. It lists the rosters of who's taken what courses and what the certification levels are at that point in time. That's being updated at least once a month. We've actually been updating it close to twice a month for the last couple months, as we've had more and more folks complete their certifications or earn complete courses that then adjust their certification. There's also links to all the different training opportunities and so on down the line. And then on the sport-specific pages, there are links to the specific learning opportunities there. And I think Ryan's going to touch on some of the web-based opportunities we have for track later on. This is what the transcript, what we're calling a transcript, looks like. It lists all the courses that the individual has completed and when they were. So if we look here, excuse me, Bruce Abbott has completed a number of courses, most recently basketball. Jeff Abel from our office has completed all of these. And then note, as it says on the side, you may not be familiar with the function in your browser, but when you're looking at a PDF, which is what this is, in the browser, you can use search or find. It varies by browser to just type in your last name and it'll take you to that point, so you don't have to scroll through all the pages. I know that definitely works in Chrome and Microsoft Edge. I'm not sure. I would have to believe there's a similar function in Firefox and other similar browsers. This is what the sports certification report looks like. Again, lists by coach and what their status is. So if we look down here to Katie Detweiler, has as an assistant coach, that applies to all sports, and hers is good until December of this year. She's completed her CSOA. She wants to do unified. She would need to take coaching unified sports. It also lists her volunteer screening, her protected behaviors, and her concussion expiration as well, and lists her individual sports on when they are. So again, that's searchable on the site. To complete a course, only those that are approved by Special Olympics Maryland will be accepted, or those that are hosted by us. And again, on that coach resource page, the coach education and development page, that lists all those opportunities and links there. We do encourage areas to host courses. We have a couple different ones that are looking to host some in the near future, once we can have actual live convening take place in the near future. One of the things that we are doing, I'm going to be adding an online version of coaching Special Olympics athletes that's done live, as opposed to the online course that's offered by Human Kinetics. Version of that is fine. Some people don't like that kind of learning and would prefer the more interactive in terms of talking to other people. And so since at the moment we're not able to offer live courses in terms of in person, we're going to see if we can't do that as an online option. And these webinars, these preseason and pre-competition webinars that we hold, that they aren't coach education. It's information sharing, but they really don't count. We usually get that. This just lists a bunch of different options for approved sport-specific examples. The one thing to note on here, and again, you'll get this slide deck, so you'll see it there. We are absolutely open to other suggestions that you may make. We would need to see the course and make sure that it has the meat, if you will, and is appropriate for this, for our audience of coaches. But we certainly are open to that. We haven't really gotten very many suggestions along those lines. Here's a similar list of the general coaching opportunities as well. Here's a list of online learning that's being done by Human Kinetics that we approved. There's a listing on the coach education site that looks similar to this, but it includes a link directly to the course and some specific instructions on how to access it. They went through a major website change, and at least for the courses that our folks are interested in, made them a little bit difficult to find. We're going to be doing a similar type of list over the next couple weeks related to the National Federation of High School Sports Associations, or NFHS. They also have some excellent courses, and we would offer that. Noted here, Special Olympics Maryland does provide a $20 per completed, successfully completed course subsidy. In some cases, that covers the full cost of the course. In some cases, it's there's some additional cost. In some cases, also, the area leadership, if they're in a financial situation where they can do so, different areas offer to cover the additional cost of a course. Check with your area. Not all are in a position to do that, but many do, and they can talk you through how to utilize that. Ryan, do you want me to just cover these? This is the.
Sure, that'd be great, Mike.
Sure. Okay. So actually, I'll be hosting both of those. For those of you who don't know, my track is my sport, if you will, from quite some time. So we're going to do a master coaches web session that's focused on those coaches who have at least 5 years of experience, and it is quite honestly just a structured discussion. We're going to, anybody who signs up for it, we're going to ask you ahead of time, what are some questions, what are some issues, what are some challenges, and then it's coaches talking to coaches, helping each other solve problems. Been extremely successful and interesting, to the point where when we've offered it a couple times a year, a lot of coaches want to come to every one of them because it's a different conversation. So that's on the 30th, but again, it's 5 years plus. And then also I'll be doing a athletics officiating course for on April 2nd. That'll go through actual officiating. As a coach, that can be very valuable. I personally, when I first, after having coached for maybe 7 years in track, when I became an official, that really helped me get a much better perspective, and so I advocate that. I would also strongly recommend that if you are hosting a competition this season for track and field, or intending to, again, things are a little up in the air, we recognize, have your folks who are running your competition attend this session as well. It will be extremely valuable to them, without a doubt. And then we're also looking to potentially add at least one additional coach athletics course targeted at the newer coach, since that may or may not apply for all of them. And
Mike, this is Steve. I think if you want to go back one, just to reiterate, the athletics officiating course, that is not just for officials. As Mike indicated, that's for coaches. So he said it well, but I think it's worth reiterating that that is not just for officials. That's for coaches to understand the officiating principles and situations in track and field or athletics. So I just thought it was worthwhile reiterating that point.
Yeah, thank you, Steve. Yeah, and again, you can utilize that for your mock competitions or your own competitions within your practices too. Turn that back, the coach's code of conduct, to, I'm not sure who's covering that.
I'll take care of it, Mike.
Sure.
This is just a section that we include in each pre-season webinar. It's very general, just how to act to ensure that the athletes have a positive experience, and that the coaches do too. So you'll be fair, considerate, and honest. Also, don't forge scores or anything like that. We'll go into some details later regarding athletes that may have the softball throw, who should be throwing a jab and everything like that, and the different levels of DQs, or the DQ that will take place if the athlete is in the wrong event. We just ask that everybody be respectful of each other, so we can have the competitive environment that the athletes deserve. Also, please take advantage, oh, my Mike's moving around.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'll go back.
No, you're good. Wherever we land on, we'll cover. Obviously, watch your language, no drugs, use of alcohol, anything like that. For practices or competition, especially summer games, just anything that you would do to upload Special Olympics guidelines in general, please do that 24/7 around events. Regarding the health and safety of athletes and unified partners, please be careful with the equipment and facilities that are in use. Sometimes we provide equipment for qualifiers and things like that. Please treat that like it's your own. Review each athlete's medical, and like we said earlier, have that with you in case a situation arises. If an athlete or unified partner needs medical advice, please direct them to the correct person. A lot of this is general information, but it's a good reminder how to uphold ourselves and what to do in certain situations. Head coach requirements. All head coaches of Special Olympics athletes and partners must have the following clearances/certifications. Completion of the submission of a Class A volunteer application and associated background screening. This goes with the same image that Mike showed earlier with the different sections, which coaches, after completing what certifications, receive what status. Completion and submission of protective behavior screening, and completion and submission of online concussion training. And as a reminder, those are good for 3 years. So with some upcoming events, the Anne Arundel Spring Games will be taking place again this year. That'll be on 4/26. That's coming up fast. We'll keep you updated. But as of now, everything through March is canceled, but April is on currently. So that will be back at the Naval Academy. There will be also an event at Wild Lake High School on 5/2. And that same date, back at Allegheny at Frostburg, who's been great to the counties out there. They'll be hosting their Allegheny Spring Games on the same date, which is May 2nd.
I think, Ryan, just to jump in, if there is anyone else out there, coaches or whatever, work with your area leadership. If you're planning to host an event and you don't see it on this list, please work with them to fill out a sanction form. We like to have those a minimum of 30 days in advance of the event and submit those to Ryan, and he'll get them up on the calendar and share them with others. So just a reminder on the sanction form. Thank you.
Yes, and there were a few coaches who made some general guesses on when their events would be. Those aren't currently on there. Once you get those sanction forms solidified, send those to me. I'll post them on the coaches resource page, and then everybody will have the opportunity to see if that applies to my county and restrictions and based on stuff like that. Rules with coaching. Only competing athletes, unified partners, and designated volunteers are allowed on the track. There are no exceptions there. Coaches are not permitted on the track. And once the event is starting, just like any other sport, there's no coaching and instructional assistance that's allowed at that time, or that athlete will risk being DQ'd. Summer Games entries in the entry process. Eligibility, athletes must compete in a minimum of 2 qualifying athletic competitions to be eligible for Summer Games. That may vary between other sports, but for athletics, it's 2. You may enter up to 3 individual events and up to 2 relays. So that'd be the 4x200 and either the 4x100 or the 4x400. The pentathlon is considered a single individual event. That's a question that I've received from a few coaches. Stuck it in there, and you'll remember that now. All events offered in special rulebook will be offered for competition at the Summer Games, except for races longer than the 10K.
Those are held in the fall as part of our distance running competition.
Well, in regards to the entry process, so there'll be the standing long jump. If you enter the standing long jump, you may not also enter the long jump, and you may not also enter the high jump. With the softball throw and tennis ball throw, you may not also enter the shot put or the mini jab. You may not enter both the softball throw and the tennis ball throw. With the wheelchair events, only open to athletes who use a wheelchair to move. Any assistant walking and anything like that would be appropriate. Motorized wheelchairs users are not permitted in manual wheelchairs. They all must be hand moved there, and athletes entered in the event shorter than the 100-meter may not also enter wheelchair events longer than the 100-meter.
And just to clarify why these are in place, bottom line is that the standing long jump and the softball throw and tennis ball throw are events that are intended for athletes who do not currently have the capability of competing in the more traditional events, such as the long jump or the high jump, or shot put, mini jab, etc. And so we really want to encourage coaches to move your athletes up to those more challenging events because most athletes can do them and really only have them do one of these fundamental events, if you will, if they are not capable of doing the more traditional events. And the same would apply here, but go ahead, Ryan.
Yep, for the running and walking events, athletes entered in the events shorter than the 100-meter may not also enter running events longer than the 100-meter. Yeah, this is exactly what Mike said. These are just some clear examples. Athletes in the 100-meter race may also be entered into the 50-meter race as part of a transition zone. In regards to the relays, that's only open to athletes who run at least 100 meters. As a reminder, you can't be in the 25-meter race in the 4x100-meter relay. So this is just expanding on what we talked about here, the big three entry percentages. So I'm going to jump down to the purpose of this just to be clear before we go through it. It's to move athletes to more challenging and more appropriate events. So the 50-meter dash, no more than 25% of your delegation's athletes may be entered in this event. Again, we're trying to push the athletes to improve and grow to their highest potential. With the softball throw, no more than 20%. And the standing long jump, that number will be at 25%, so a quarter of your athletes. So this is kind of a great example of what that looks like. Several athletes in athletics are considered fundamental events and are intended only for athletes of lower ability level. So if we look at the chart down here, here's two examples, the softball throw and also the 50-meter race. I think it's cool to look back over the numbers throughout the year of we're kind of moving away from those athletes that are in those events. Back in 2017, there was a lot more doing the softball throw compared to where we are now. And the same goes for the 50-meter race for the most part. So it is great, and it's an amazing opportunity for the athletes who are just starting out. But again, we're just trying to push the athletes as far as they can, and the coaches that I know have done a great job with that in the past.
Can I stop you here, Ryan, for a sec?
Yeah.
So if you have a qualifier and your athlete is, has run the 20-meter, and has done the softball throw and is throwing more than 20 meters, we're going to catch that when we're doing our entries for the competition, and we're not going to enter them in those events. However, if it's really close, if it's doing 19 meters or 17 meters, you take a look at that athlete and see, in the time remaining, whether you can move them at that point, because with the adrenaline flowing, when it comes time to summer games itself, and he or she is really pumped up and heaves that softball 23 meters when their best prior was 19, that's subject to a disqualification. So, it's not just those hard and fast numbers, but look and see what your athletes are doing in the competition. If they're progressively getting better, and by the time of summer games, you don't want to put them in danger of being DQ'd.
With the rules reminders and some more updated changes here, the Special Olympics is shot put. The female 8 to 11, and the weight is now going to be 2 kilograms, which is 4.4 pounds. The 800-meter race will start with 1 turn stagger. The 1500-meter and longer races are waterfall starts, so that's an extended start line. And Ron, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's everybody starts at one time, but the start line's spread out a little bit more, correct?
I'm sorry, Ryan, which are you talking about?
For the waterfall start?
Yeah, I mean, it's just, there's a line on the track that is sort of an elliptical kind of line. It's not the staggered start that you have in the 4x1, but it's a line. And so for the outside lane, if you're starting a little bit further outside, you have a little bit, you're a little bit closer or a little bit further out. So you equalize the distance. It's a pretty clear line on probably most every track near the start line.
Yep.
Yeah. For those who aren't familiar with it, just as a note, with the 800 with the 1 turn stagger, that means that they can cut in from an outside lane to the inner lane. Once they finish 1 turn, there'll be what's called a break line. I think we have a slide that has the colors on it later. On the waterfall, they can cut in immediately as long as they aren't obstructing another runner. So that outside lane or that outside runner that Ron was talking about can literally come right into lane 1 as long as he or she isn't obstructing another runner.
In regards to the relays, there is no fly zone anymore, so there is a 30-meter exchange zone. That was updated, I believe, this past year.
2 years ago. So we've been operating under this for a few years.
Okay, thanks. For the 4x400 meter relay, there's a 3-turn stagger. There's more than 4 teams. 1-turn stagger recommended for 4 or fewer teams. In regards to the USTF, protest may be filed by an athlete or official representative of an athlete. The rule book will be attached, and when we send that out, that'll be a good link to click on and look through. For the rules reminders, all events recorded to the next lowest centimeter. So if it's 5 meters, 6.65.4, 5, it'll be 65 centimeters. With the shot put, use the correct weight shot. For men, that'll be 8.8 pounds. Women, 6.6. Men, that'll be 6.6 pounds. So this is...
we need to get you going with the metric systems.
Oh, okay. All right.
Men are 4 kilograms.
Yep.
So
Women will be 3.
Yeah, think metrics. Track is all metric. So.
Okay. It's like powerlifting.
That's right.
So men will be 3 kilograms. Women ages 8 to 11 will be 2. The wheelchair shot put will be the same as the women's, which will be 2 kilograms. Athletes who use wheelchairs may also be entered in the regular shot put divisions using the proper weight shot. You must start with shot touching or in close proximity to the neck to the chin. It is not a throw, it's a put. Putter must set in this position. The shot cannot drop below this point during the putt, and the shot cannot be taken behind the line of the shoulders. Rules reminders for the mini jab. The throw must be over the shoulder or upper part of the throwing arm. It must land with the tip into the ground. First, it does not have to stick in the ground, but the tip must touch before any other part of the jab. The runway is 4 meters wide and a minimum of 8 meters long. Sometimes we extend that a little bit just so it's a better visual, but that's the dimensions that we go with. For the softball throw and the ball throw for distance, it's a standard softball, which is 30 centimeters, and we also have a tennis ball for those athletes. Any type of throw is permitted. Must land inside the inner edges of the sector lines, just like with the mini jab. The measure from the point ball first touches the ground to inside of the throwing line. It's not where the ball rolls, it's where it lands first. Usually we have some great volunteers there, noticing where that ball landed and getting the correct measurement. The runway is 2.05 meters wide and 3 meters long. Jump into the...
Stop you here, Ryan, for a sec.
Yeah.
Something that comes up almost every year at the throwing events is where your athlete is throwing from, either the mini jab or the ball throw, whether it's softball or tennis ball. Our officials out there are not coaching your athletes on where they need to throw to. You really need to coach them up that they need to get up to the throwing line in order to get the maximum distance on their throws. We will show them where the throwing line is, but it's not our responsibility to coach them up to get them where they need to be. You guys and ladies, need to keep your athletes, in their head where they can go up to get their maximum distance on their throws.
I would also note, putting my coach hat on, since I still coach, the runway actually for both of those actually is a runway. It's surprising how many athletes just walk up to the line and throw from there. If you can work with your athletes to get them to run and throw, whether we're talking the jab or the softball, that the momentum of their body transfers to the implement, and definitely does make a difference in terms of the distance that they throw. So that's good technique to work on.
I also thought it was amazing during Baltimore City spring games when a coach said, visualize me out there. I know coaches do that, but there was a difference between multiple meters when an athlete thought about throwing to the coach that they visualized in practice compared to just throwing it out. I thought that was awesome. I know as a coach you understand that, but it was a pretty cool visual for me there. With the standing long jump, it must be a 2-foot takeoff, so your 2 feet will be together. You must jump with toes of both feet behind the takeoff line. You will be DQ'd if you walk back towards the takeoff line. Distance measured is from the mark nearest to the takeoff line in the front of the takeoff line. Here's a great visual of what those vectors look like. Some reminders regarding the long jump. The front of the toe board is 1 meter from the edge of the sandpit. Athletes must be able to jump at least 1 meter to enter this event. If you don't reach the pit, it's a fault. Jumpers can place a marker on the side of the runway to help them know when to take off at. The distance measured is marked from the nearest the takeoff line to the front of the takeoff line. The toe board will be marked by white chalk. It will not be a board, that will be chalk. With the high jump, you must be able to jump at least 1 meter high to enter this event. That is the same measurements as the long jump there. No dives, you'd be automatically DQ'd if you do so, even in warm-ups, and if the official sees that. Jumpers can place a marker in the takeoff area for there also.
Right. And the no dives automatic DQ, that's a safety consideration.
Ron,
Ryan, do you want either Ron or I to cover this?
Yeah, I was just asking Ron. Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
What I was going to highlight, unfortunately, was the line that starts, unfortunately, a standard is not always the standard.
Yeah.
These are generally, the colors and lines on a track, but, now that, Mike could probably talk to this a little bit better than I, but tracks are all different colors, and sometimes, the lines on the track are different colors too, but, the arrows or the triangles are often what you're going to see for your relay exchange zones. So, pay attention, look at your track wherever you're, if you're hosting a meet or wherever you're practicing. Otherwise, I think I'll just defer to Mike for a better explanation of what you're seeing.
Yeah,
here.
sure. Okay, so a couple messages to take from this in addition to what Ron was just saying. For those of you who are new to track, I don't know that anybody who's live with us is in this category, but folks may be listening here. Track has a common finish line that all races finish at, and then it varies, the start line varies going back. For most of those that are noted there, if it's a waterfall start or the stagger start for the 400 and so on, and actually for pretty much all the starts, it is marked with a white line. Typically, the 800 meter and the 4x4 meter, the one turn stagger and the 3-turn staggers, will have, like you see there, a green mark or a blue mark in it. It could be a solid line. Again, the key thing is look at your track. If it's relatively new, it should be able to be seen on there. It'll say typically 100-meter start or 110 start. That's often a confusion point. Make sure you're starting your 100-meter runners at the 100-meter mark, not the 110 hurdle mark, which is 10 meters back. The break line I had mentioned before, that's where they, when you're using a waterfall start, we're using a staggered start, the runners can cut in. That's typically a broken green line on the back. I would always have someone there to direct them that's when they can cut in. Relays, again, the triangles pointing into the relay zone or the exchange zone, they're typically triangles, but I've seen a lot of tracks where they're just lines. And then the note here, given the recent change, and actually, if you're using a high school track, NFHS just changed this year to going to the 30-meter exchange zone. So almost every track that you're at, unless somehow they've gone and spent the money to repaint it, the back of your exchange zone or the start of your exchange zone is going to be that small triangle. That applies to the 4x1 and the 4x2. Anything above that never had a fly zone to begin with, and so it's a regular 20-meter exchange zone. But in addition to it's not always standard. When in doubt, measure it out. I will humbly acknowledge many years ago I started races on the wrong start line. So it's not a common mistake, but it is an easy mistake to make. So.
And as we go to the next slide, just to be the time monitor here, we've got about 10 minutes.
Yep.
So just to be mindful of that, everyone. Thank you.
Ron, you want to take
This is
this?
me, Ryan. I mean,
Or you want me to run this part?
generally, I mean, this is exactly what we're saying before, where the start lines are.
Yeah, exactly. So, and then the relay exchanges are there. The 1500 fall line or waterfall line is there, and again, the brake line. And these are just the typical locations that the starter would start at. Ryan or Ron?
Yeah,
Well, the only thing, in difference of time, I don't want to have go over stuff that's out there. What I would emphasize, if at all possible, or get your athletes used to hearing a gun for a start. You don't want their first experience at the start line hearing a gun at summer games. That could be, that's a daunting experience. So to do your best, at your qualifiers, and whatever you can, get your athletes used to hearing a gun for starts.
Okay.
For the 400 meter, we'll use a 3-command start. It'll be on your mark, get set, and then the gun fires. For the races longer than the 400 meter, we'll use a 2-command start, on your mark, and then the gun will fire after that. Just covering something from the slide before, you are allowed to have somebody next to the athlete to get them up to the correct line. Once that event is about to start, you need to be away from that athlete at that time. They must go on their own. There's no patting them on the back or doing anything to get them started there.
Right. Well, to clarify with that, or Ron, did you want to?
No, go ahead.
Yeah, to clarify with that typically when you have the athlete go to staging, you would not have someone escort them. That's only more in an extreme situation. One of the officials would handle any kind of a touch start, or if there is an extreme situation where there's difficulty helping the athlete get ready to start, then we may have someone come in, but the athlete should be independent.
Yeah, and one more thing, we have coming back for year after year after year, very experienced people, clerk of course at the start of the race, at the start line, our starter, and people at the finish line have been doing this for many, many years, and we get it right. We get it right.
Okay. And again, in the interest of time, again, you can read through all these yourself. Again, anything, Ron, do you want to highlight your?
I think the last point is a point of emphasis. I mean, in terms of DQ and running in your lanes, what we're looking for races to go around a curve, the 400, the 200, where there are lane assignments. If your athlete shortens the race, if he's by going one lane towards, if he's in lane 4 and goes into lane 4, any of the lesser lanes, that is shortening the course. That's an automatic DQ. For the short races, for the 25s, the 50s, the 100s, where it's a stay in lane the entire race, your athlete is not necessarily disqualified for leaving his lane. He or she will be disqualified if he or she impedes another racer. So leaving a lane is not necessarily a disqualification for the shortest races, but it will be a DQ for the longer races if you're shortening the course by going to a lane that's further inside. Not necessarily if you're in lane 1 and you scoot out to lane 2 or 3, because that's actually a disadvantage to you. You've not created an advantage by doing so. So that's usually not something that the coaches need reminding of, but oftentimes family members and spectators are not aware of that rule.
I think we've covered most of this already. again,
One point here is in terms of finish times, we are looking for, we're capturing the order of finish, and we will match that to the times as we take them. Again, you know, at the control center, if families are bringing recorded, you know, images or something off their phones that they've taken, you know, this is how my athlete finished. We're going to go by what our track officials see. If it's a judgment call, and this is what they see in terms of finish, and if it's also a judgment call in terms of disqualifications for impedes or things like that, you're certainly, you know, if you would like to protest that, judgment calls, you know, generally are not something that get overruled. If there's an infraction of the rule, that's one thing for protest. But you know, in terms of this, places determined by the order of the finish, not necessarily the time that we capture.
Right.
We get the order of finish correctly, because that's how we award gold, silver, bronze, etc.
Okay. And then one other highlight here, or two other highlights, I'm sorry, it's the front wheels of the wheelchair if you're using a wheelchair race. That's not just in terms of the finish, that's also the start. The front wheels need to be behind the start line. And then assisted walks refer to the use of assistive devices. It is not the, you know, someone assisting the athlete ambulating down the, or getting down the lane or down the track. Relays here, I think that's pretty much, you can read through that. I don't know that there's anything, again, in the interest of time, to highlight. But it's the baton that matters in terms of where you're passing it. That has to be within the exchange zone. And again, it's a 30-meter exchange zone now, and whoever drops it must pick it up and bring it back. Again, given we've got like 3 minutes. These are just some training suggestions. You can go through those. Sorry for taking over, but just want to make sure we get this done. Again, these are all suggestions that you can utilize. And the coach resource page, please do go to that if you have the opportunity. In fact, actually, even if you don't have the, you definitely go to it. It has a lot of good information, and go to the track or this athletics page on that. There are some different equipment suppliers. I've used all of them at various times. They're all high quality and such. One thing to keep in mind, which I hope all of you either have a gun, a starter's pistol, or you're getting one, ammunition cannot be shipped overnight. They can only ship it ground for by federal regulation. So please be sure to order that well in advance. And then some more questions if you have them for your sport directors. The last thing, we're not going to go through these. This section here just lists different things in terms of the forms and what the forms are. You can read them at your leisure. Just be sure that you're aware of all those that are there. And that said, going through that. I thought there was there we go. Thank you. We do have actually 2 minutes or so if anybody has any questions. Sorry for rushing there. At the end, the track has a lot of stuff to go over.
Hi, Jeff. Sean Riley.
Hi, Sean.
Hi. I can find those slides on the SOMD website.
Ryan?
Yeah, Sean. So as of tomorrow, if I get to it later tonight, but definitely by tomorrow, those slides will be up there. And also we upload this recording to YouTube also. So you'll have access to the recording and also the slides.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Ryan. Yeah, yep. Jeff, I got your email yesterday. Monica Stevens emailed you and she CC'd me, so I got it there. So I guess worst case, if I can't find the slides for some reason, can I reach out to you for them?
Yeah, actually, I'm not Jeff Abel. I think you're thinking about Jeff Abel.
I was.
I'm Mike
sorry.
Sardowski. Sure, but just follow the links for where it says coach. It'll bring you to the coach resource page, and then go to the track page for that.
Okay, thank you. Final one was, yeah, I've got to get my track certification done, and I was told go SOMD, then click on the coach link, and I can find it in there to go through the class I need to go through for a track coach.
Yeah, there's different links in there. There's some different options. If you want to, I have another webinar right away, but if you want to give me a call tomorrow or Sean, I'll reach out to you and we can, or either I or Ryan will reach out to you, can walk you through that.
Okay, thanks, gentlemen.
Sure.
Looking through here, I don't see any other questions at this time.
Okay.
Sean, I'll reach out to you personally tomorrow. Make sure you have access to everything that you need there. Kind of walk you through that. If we don't have any more questions, I want to say thank you very much to everybody for being on. With this being my first go around with athletics, please reach out to me if I have not met you. I love talking to you guys. I think it's better once we know each other to work more professionally together, and I would love to do so. So thank you guys very much for being on, and I hope you have a great night.
Thank you.
Yep, thanks, Ron.